In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains the nature of life and love.
Derek Fake asks, how do you see love, eros, in your general worldview? Where does love come from? Well, you guys, you ask impossibly hard questions. Well, I think that truth has to be embodied inside love, or embedded inside love. You know, it's not easy to figure out a hierarchy of values, of ultimate values. There's the great traditional values of the good and the beautiful and the true, and let's say the courageous and that sort of thing. It's not easy to figure out how you arrange those hierarchically, but it seems to me that truth is likely something that serves a master of one form or another, at least ethical truth, and love is something like the decision that being is fundamentally good, or it's the decision to act as if being is fundamentally good. That might be the right way of thinking about it. So, you know, I thought about this in relationship to my son when he was little, 3 years old and like unbearably cute. And, you know, little 3-year-olds, they're fairly easily hurt. I mean, they're quite robust in some ways, but they're fairly easily hurt. They can run out into traffic and, you know, they skin their knees and they bang their heads on tables, and, you know, they're prone to emotional breakdown, and they have all these extreme fragilities that make you nervous, I would say, and alert and attentive as an adult, but that also expose you directly to the fact of the potential tragedy of life, which is, I think, one of the reasons why having children matures you in a way that nothing else can. And, you know, I've written about this in my new book, 12 Rules for Life. I imagined that I could remove his vulnerabilities one by one so that he couldn't be hurt. And so, you know, I thought, well, I could make him into a robot and that was 15 feet tall and made out of metal, and that would remove his physical vulnerability, and he could have tremendous strength. And, you know, you could turn him into something like a superhero with all these strengths instead of these exceptional vulnerabilities. But what I realized very rapidly was that every time you removed a vulnerability, you removed an essential part of the person, right? A part that you really love, because with a little 3-year-old kid, for example, I mean, it's their fragility in some sense that's a huge part of their charm and appeal. It's not like you'd wish it on them, but it's part of their value as beings. And I think that reflects something like this paradoxical situation that the Taoists referred to when they, in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about what makes a pot valuable is the empty space inside it. It's what it's not as much as what it is that makes it, well, actual, first of all, real, but also useful. And there's something really profound about that, in that limitations, I would say limitation is the precondition for being. And it's really, I'd like to get this right so that you can follow it, because it's one of the most useful thoughts, I think, that has ever occurred to me. The first is that limits are a precondition for being, just like rules are a precondition for a game. Like, you can't play a game where you can make any move at any time. You have to narrow the playing field substantially, and you have to put restrictions on what can be done in order for anything to be done. And so maybe being is this paradoxical state where there's just enough limitation to maximize possibility, something like that. And that seems right to me. Why that would be, I have no idea, but maybe that's something like an answer to why there's anything, why anything was created, or I know I'm speaking metaphysically, but I still think it's worthwhile doing so. And then, well, if limitation is the precondition for being, then that introduces suffering into the world, and tragedy, because of course suffering and tragedy are a consequence of limitation. And so then the situation is that if you want to have the being where possibility is maximized, you have to accept the limitations that produce tragedy. And so that's maybe the justification for tragedy, assuming that such a thing needs to be justified. And then the final thought in that 3-part series is, well, maybe there's a way to live so that the tragedy that's an intrinsic part of limited being becomes bearable, or becomes even something like celebratable. And I guess that would be akin to Nietzsche's wish for the eternal return. Like, he thought you should live so that if every moment that you lived recurred eternally, that would be a good thing. And so it's a heroic mode of being. And it's conceivable that a heroic mode of being that requires the adoption of responsibility gives your life sufficient gravitas and weight and meaning so that the tragedy of being can be withstood without becoming corrupt. And I would certainly hope that would be the case, and I think there's some reason to assume that it might be. So